Welcome to the North East Shadow MPC with Clive Owen LLP, Recognition PR and the Northern Echo. In this session, we regularly talk to business leaders from different sectors about what their business outlook is like and how they think the real Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee should act on the interest rates later this week. Inflation was stable at 4% in January, but still above the Bank of England's target of 2%. So that is bound to be in the bank's thinking later this week. So let's see what our members think. Is it time for an interest rate cut? If this would be good for the regional economy, or do they think that actually stability is still the way forward? I'll be surprised if there's any votes for a raise in the interest rates, but we'll see. And I'm starting with Nicola Bellaby from our partners Clive Owen LLP. Nicola, what are your clients telling you about how business is at the moment in the North East?
I think they were getting a little bit more confident, Caroline, because raw material prices had stabilised, but they were really hoping for some changes in the budget that would help them, and there was very little in the budget to help, which was quite a surprise, really. There was a reduction in employees' national insurance, but nothing for employers, and that might take a little bit of pressure off wage inflation, but at the same time, we've got that big increase coming in national minimum wage, and whilst that's probably not a bad thing in itself, it pushes all salaries up, because if you've got someone who needs to be paid at a higher level than that, the clients are finding that all the wages are still getting really pushed up, and that's expensive. Disappointing that there was no reduction in corporation tax. I think a lot of the clients were hoping for that. They really thought that would be coming, but nothing there. So disappointment in the budget, and it's just we're just in a bit of a limbo at the minute, I think, waiting to see what happens with the election when that comes in. So yeah, pretty static, a bit static at the minute.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a little bit like that heading into electioneering time. Carl, you work with a lot of different clients. What are you hearing out there? Did the budget actually help anybody? And is the election in people's minds?
Don't think the budget helped anybody specifically. I don't think there was any out-and-out winners where you could clearly turn around and say they are significantly better off, or they're going to benefit significantly from the budget. I think taking sort of the budget to one side, our clients and certainly our business and our industry is feeling a lot more buoyant than it was 2, 3, 4 months ago. That is obviously as a result of inflation continuing to fall. The presumption then that interest rates will fall over that shorter term compared to where we were obviously 6, 12 months ago. And therefore that's had a bit of a rally in investment markets since Q4 of last year. And obviously when clients' investment portfolios have increased, as they have over the last 3 to 6 months now, naturally clients are happier. It's more encouraging for us as a business because it directly impacts our revenue streams. So as an industry and as a business, yes, it's more buoyant. What came out of the budget for our type of client, we're relatively fortunate that we look after clients with a decent level of net worth. And, a lot of what came out of the budget doesn't seem to benefit them. I'm not saying that it should have, but it certainly seems to be turning the screw a little bit on those people in terms of the changes to, the holiday let market, capital gains tax allowances reducing again further from April. There's certainly nothing immediate to shout about moving forward, I would say.
And Tim, from Excite Architecture, we've just heard Carl use the word buoyant and Nicola say there's more confidence. What's it like in your sector? What's it like in construction?
Well, it's not great, to be perfectly honest. Last week, there was the news that a mid-scale regional contractor, Sergo Construction, went into administration after a court judgment, effectively, with what looks like the loss of all jobs. That follows Toll and Metnor last year. And I think what that reads across, for me anyway, is that there's sort of masked financial stress in the sector, which is beginning to find its way out. Investment is not being great. There are all sorts of other stories about wobbles over the past 12 months or so that leaves the sector, construction itself, in quite a difficult situation. I think that there's potential bright lights or brighter lights in development. There's a keenness to get development working, and that, of course, will need construction to support it. But it's still being driven after inflation and raw material price rises and so on. It's still being driven by a least cost is best sort of mentality, and that actually is it's beginning to play out in these administrations that we're seeing. Highest levels over the last 12 months in the construction industry for quite a few years. So it's a bit of a mixed picture between development and construction, but there is nobody I'm speaking to who's got very much confidence about the rest of 24 being anything other than flat.
So not quite so upbeat. Donna at Populous, you're global specialist recruiters. How is recruitment? Obviously, the minimum wage won't affect the type of people you recruit, but do you find that actually pushes up wages all the way through to the top level, or does that not really have an effect?
For our type of candidates, it doesn't really have an effect. I mean, in the recruitment sector in general, I would say that 2023 was challenging, but transaction volumes across the sector remained high and robust. And indeed, UK recruitment in general grew. For ourselves, we grew and we've invested. We're getting more staff. And I think that's indicative of a tight labour market in the sectors in which we work. So that's a stressor, and that puts inflationary pressures on wages, which we're still seeing. They're slightly calmer than through last year, but we're still seeing pressure on those wages in our the sectors in which we work. So, pharma is fairly steady in general in investment terms. They're still working through their stock issues on the back of COVID. The pharma construction market is buoyant for us. High-end manufacturing and automation is steady. Aerospace, we're seeing investment is steady again. And in automotive, particularly in EVs, in which we work, that's very buoyant. But all of these sectors in which we work are experiencing skill shortages. So there's going to be no let-up on inflationary pressures on wages. And we've seen the recent figures on wage increases, and they're still above the CPI index. So from our perspective, buoyant, our clients are investing, but they're being held back by skills shortages or inflationary pressures.
Yes, no, we've heard that quite a few times, those words, skills shortages. Martin Pullen from FRP Advisory, you tend to see the other side of businesses. I know Graham always says to you, we don't want you to be booming because that's not a good sign in the nicest possible way. But have things quietened down at all for you?
No, so this is, I've been doing this role 23 years, and this is a real peak period for us in terms of the number of businesses reaching out for help. Construction, picking up on what Tim has said, absolutely. We have had the issue for a number of years now where, cheapest is best. Procurement policies with local authorities, including, commercial enterprises have dictated that. And that has meant, and, anecdotally, you'll hear many businesses in the construction sector bemoaning the fact that, losing contracts for prices that seem uneconomic and unrealistic And typically, those are the businesses that end up at our door that have, pitched in to buy in turnover and just don't deliver a margin. You've got to think that construction, is a bit very, it's a big industry. It's a broad church. I mean, it affects everyone from the businesses, dealing with manufacturing and installation of kitchens and bathrooms and lighting, trade counters, architects, surveyors. And I think certainly for the last 12 months, what we've been seeing in that sector is it's the delays in new projects that have been a major challenge. Some of these projects, as Tim will tell you, take years in the planning. And even at SME level, you can know about them for, you're pricing it a year and a half, 2 years before that. I think we've had a perfect storm. Yes, there was some supply chain issues which delayed projects. There was the, wage inflation, skills shortages, which yes is true. But some of these projects were priced on, 2 years ago, cost of borrowing, when many of these projects now at, borrowing rates we've seen increase significantly, and because of the risk in the sector, cost of borrowing again increases. And that means that a number of these projects that have been promised and businesses have sort of kind of hedged the bets. Okay, well, it is going to come. It's not lost revenue, it's delayed revenue. By the time they've come and they're expecting to proceed, actually some of them are uneconomic. So yeah, certainly construction has been a sector we've seen a lot of activity in. Surgico is a case that our Newcastle team are dealing with. And that's a challenge. We don't have enough houses in the UK. We do have a highly skilled, very competent construction sector. We've got great professionals. I think in the UK generally, if you look at how we perform in the UK compared to some of our European counterparts, we actually do pretty well. But I think that lack of certainty on investment, the uncertainty in the environment generally is meaning that sector is, well, it's definitely, if you look at it as a sector as a whole, it is contracting. And there's always a downturn at some point, but you hope that you're going to have one bad year in 8 or 9, and I think the construction sector feels like it's having a bad year in every 4 or 5, despite the fact that if you look at the home building side of it, we definitely need to construct more. The only one of the little comment I'll add to that, if we're talking about construction, is still there is a boom in industrial sheds. There's a shortage of that type of building in the northeast, and I believe in the UK generally. So there is a desire to construct more, whether it be residential or commercial. It's funding those at the moment that is more of a challenge, I think.
Well, keeping on that theme, actually, John Cartwright, you're a board member of Constructing Excellence Northeast. Do you concur with what Tim and Martin have told us about the sector?
Yeah, I think everything that they've said is absolutely spot on. I think that I've got a couple of hats that I wear. Obviously, one with Constructing Excellence, and my main job, I'm head of construction of the built environment at Hartlepool College. So, the construction industry, we need 225,000 jobs creating over the next couple of years. Where they're going to come from, tier 1 contractors sometimes don't invest in skills. It's mainly the small, the SME guys and girls that go around and invest and pick up their skills. But being in this industry for 25 years, being in education for 25 years, I think construction in education, we generally follow what goes on in the sector. So if the sector's absolutely buoyant, then we're just following them up the hill in terms of recruitment. But looking at all of the colleges, if I represent them around the northeast, everybody still wants to be a bricklayer because there's that much money being earned on sites as bricklayers, albeit despite their salaries have been stopped recently because some sites aren't starting. So there's lots of mixed messages that we're getting from what's going on out there and within the sector. I think you Martin and Tim touched on some things regards merchants and suppliers. Some merchants I speak to are absolutely buoyant. Some merchants I speak to, there's not many extensions getting built around the region. But despite that, we've got lots of infrastructure projects. You look at Hartlepool, you look at Darlington, you look at Middlesbrough and Sunderland, all getting new train stations or renovations of train stations. We've still got the work that's going on the A1. So, I think in terms of skills, we are still recruiting. We still, supplying the chain that's out there. That's what's going on. But I think what Tim mentioned there, we've had some sad news in the region regards Surgo. I think there was 46 people displaced there. Adding on to the fact that we had Toll and Metnor last year, 400 people displaced there. So hopefully that we can get, because I know Constructing Excellence has a jobs board, where we helped the 400 people, or best part of the 400 people last year, to try and get placed within some of our members in and around the region. But it's up and down.
It's up and down, yeah. That's fascinating insight into construction there. Now then, I'm going to ask you all just to raise your hands before I quickly go around again and ask you why you voted that way. I don't think I need to ask this, but does anybody think that interest rates should go up this week? I'll take that as a no. What about a cut in interest rates? Do you think the time's right yet? So Tim thinks the time's right for an interest rate cut. So everybody else, I think if you're raising your hands for to remain as we are. Yep, right. Well, I'll come to you first, Tim, then. The dissenting voice. Why do you think the time might just be right for a cut now?
Yeah, I hadn't realised I was going to be on my own. But there are two real reasons. One is rather myopically, I'm thinking about the context of the construction industry itself, and I'm going to suggest 0.25% would be a nod in the right direction. There are predictions that the rate is going to fall over the next 6 months anyway, and then further into next year. So I think it would be a good signal to try and encourage a bit more investment, a bit more green light on the sector. I realise that might have some damaging effects elsewhere, but there is an overriding sense that we are a bit static as an economy generally in the UK. And it feels to me, anyway, that we might be falling behind overall as well as in the sector. So that's why.
Nicola, you don't feel it's time yet to change. Why is that?
No, but I can see exactly where Tim's coming from at the same time, and there's always pros and cons, isn't there? But I still think we need to encourage stability, and whilst inflation's higher than it should be, so that's why I think interest rates should stay the same really going forward. Because there's a lot of uncertainty in with the election, with the budget not delivering any change, so that's why I think keep it the same.
And Carl, your thoughts?
Yeah. Again, I do agree with Tim in the fact that I think, it would be lovely to be able to reduce interest rates and ease that financial pressure on businesses and individuals. So I agree with the emotional side of reducing them. I do think it'll be right to reduce them later on in the year. But I go back to sort of the principles of science and economics around why we put interest rates up in the first place, and that was to try and curb demand. And I do think we need to let this settle at the current level for a bit longer so that it becomes known and felt that this is the norm. I think if we get back into that reducing interest rates, people will suddenly think, oh, things are going to get great again and go out spending again. And I think we're in danger then of inflation suddenly going back the other way. So I do think for UK PLC, the long-term benefit is to stay static for now, as Nicola's just alluded to. But, emotionally, it would be lovely to have a reduction so we all feel a bit better off. But it's that short-term pain, long-term gain is my personal view at the moment.
And Donna, your thoughts on stability?
Absolutely agree with Carl and appreciate that desire for some push into the economy, but with inflationary pressures still there in the wage pressures, I really think we need to keep the current interest rate. Many of our clients are international firms, and they're looking for certainty and consistency when making big investments in facilities and people in the UK. So if we want to grow these science-based industries or secure investment from multinational firms of any variety, we do need to give them the ability to plan long-term. And I fear that if we do decrease interest rates now, we'll get into a rise again in inflation later in the year, which is already predicted. So right now we need to send a signal that we're a steady ship, that the markets have settled. Otherwise, I think we'll find that other countries will attract the jobs and investment from these multinational companies.
Thanks, Donna. And Martin, your thoughts?
Oh, there's a lot of reverb there. I think that's on to me. Yeah, I agree with everything that's been said. This is probably the most marginal decision I've had to date. I take on board everything that everyone's said. Obviously, we have seen the increased inflation has had the effect that we wanted it to. I think I think it's 60% of households are spending less now and expect to spend less this year than they did last year. I think we've got a 3 in 10 of households could not cope with I think it's an £850 one-off shock bill. That is concerning. A fall in interest rates feels like it's coming to me, but for the time being, I think we hold our nerve, and I think as stable as we can be. For me, I think we're waiting for the next election before anything more significant will happen, and it feels that that's the right thing to do. The budget was we're still seeing the increase in tax rates because of the kind of banding creep, as it were. But I think really it'll be interesting to see where we get to at the end of the year. The biggest single impact from all the economic data I've seen on the UK economy is our Brexit decision, which I'm seeing reverberate through most of the businesses I am dealing with. It's affected every sector, and I don't think I've seen anything positive that's come out of it. And I'd be keen to see how we might seek to somehow reset our relationship with the EU in some way, shape, or form that could actually try and get us away from this sort of stagnant growth that we have in the UK.
And that's a whole nother programme there, Martin, I think. And John, finally, you're still remaining as interest rates as they were, unlike Tim. Do you actually see them being cut in the near future?
Yeah, I think everybody on the call is probably with Tim and want what Tim that would be nice. But I think in terms of what everybody else has said at this moment in time, a bit of stability and stay exactly where we are. But I can see exactly what Martin said there in the future, near future. And it's after the election weekend, it might maybe drop a bit.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody. Not quite unanimous this month. I think that's the first time for a little while we haven't been unanimous. But thanks to everybody on the North East Shadow MPC for your views. And let's see what the Bank of England do later this week.